Madeleine was sitting on the tapas terrace, eating. She looked so pale and worn out, I went straight up to her and asked if she was all right. Had she been okay at the club when Ella left to go to the beach? Yes, she said, but now she was really tired and wanted me to pick her up, which I did. 10 minutes later, the 5 of us went back to our apartment. I was carrying Madeleine. Because she was so exhausted, we skipped playtime that evening. Later, however, Kate was to tell the world that Madeleine told her before going to bed that this had been the best day of my life, a claim that doesn't somehow ring true. Does a 3-year-old really say things like that? And would she say that after she had not been able to play with her friend Ella that afternoon, and when, according to Kate, she was pale, tired and worn out? She says the 5 of us went back to the apartment. It would surely be more natural to just say, we went back to the apartment. Why does she have to emphasise the 5 of us? But even more curious is Kate's claim that she and Jerry all walked back to their apartment, but that she was carrying Madeleine, not Jerry. Madeleine would probably have weighed at least 2.5 stone at that time. Why wasn't Jerry carrying Madeleine? Just as relevant, Kat Baker doesn't mention anything about Madeleine looking unwell or so pale, worn out and exhausted as Kate McCann claims. Here is a suggestion that I suggest fits the known facts. If indeed Madeleine was already dead by Thursday, then probably Jerry McCann would have collected the twins from the creche that afternoon. Perhaps that is why the 2 of them may have concocted this story about carrying 2.5 stone Madeleine by herself back to the apartment on her own, and then the pair of them entering by different doors. Now let's look at what the written creche records have to say about that afternoon. These records purport to be accurate records of when the parents delivered the children to and collected them from their respective creches. Let's look at the record of Amelie and Sean, who were in the other creche called Jellyfish. Here we see Kate's actual signature, giving the time she took the twins out of the creche at 5:25 p.m. The column Parents' Location has been redacted on these documents as these are the parents' private telephone numbers. It also seems from this record that there were only 3 children that day in the group run by Stacey or Sinead. As a matter of interest, the record for that group in the morning of the 3rd of May is missing from the creche records handed to the Portuguese police. So now we come to the record that day for Madeleine's group, the Lobsters, run by nanny Kat Baker. Here once again we see what is clearly Kate McCann's signature, K. McCann. She gives the time of collecting Madeleine as 5:30 p.m. In each case on the sheets she uses the continental style of writing 7, thus 7. So how do these creche records reconcile with what we saw just now? That she says in her book, having arranged for Jerry to meet the children, I had finished my run by 5:30 at the tapas area, where I found Madeleine and the twins already having their tea with Jerry. She says nothing in her book about first collecting the twins, but the creche records say that she did at 5:25 p.m. So why this clear contradiction? She quite clearly says she went straight to the tapas area, and she says that Madeleine and the twins were already having tea with Jerry. At this point I should mention that in none of his statements does Jerry McCann state that he himself went to collect Madeleine from the Lobsters group at the Ocean Club reception and then return back to the tapas area for the high tea. Now I go back to the signatures on the creche records. If, as Kate maintains in her book, it was Jerry who collected the children, and that by the time she had finished her run along the beach they were all in the tapas area and not in their creches, then why is her signature on the creche records that afternoon and not Jerry's? What we can surely say is that either the McCanns are not telling the truth about this event, or the creche records are wrong, or maybe both are wrong. Later I'll examine whether some of the creche records may have been forged. Another point of interest is that Jerry is said to have come to collect the children straight from the tennis courts, whereas presumably Kate arrived at the creche or the tapas area after what by all accounts was a very long run. Kat Baker does say that she thinks that Kate arrived to the high tea in her sports clothes, but says nothing about what Jerry was wearing. And Kat Baker seems vague about that day's events. Asked who dropped Madeleine off at the creche that afternoon, she says she doesn't know. Asked who picked Madeleine up from the creche at lunchtime, she answers, "I can't remember." How can she be so vague about the events of that most momentous day of her life? Let's now probe what other evidence there really was this alleged high tea event with the McCanns, their 3 children and Kat Baker. I've looked at all the other witness statements for this day and have found the following. No other parent at the holiday says they were having high tea with the children in the tapas area that afternoon. Kat Baker, Madeleine's creche nanny, says that Madeleine was at high tea from 1525 to 1800. Maybe it is a mistake by using the 24-hour clock. Possibly she meant to say 5:25 p.m. to 6 p.m. Kat Baker also claims that Madeleine was in the lobster group that morning and went with the sailing group in the morning for the so-called mini sail. Kat Baker says in her statement that Madeleine was picked up that afternoon by Kate, not Jerry, once again contradicting Kate McCann's account in her book, that she went straight to the tapas area, where she said the 3 children and Jerry were already having high tea together. An Ocean Club worker, Geronimo Salcidas, made an informal statement on the 4th of May, the day after Madeleine was reported missing, claiming he saw Madeleine at 4:45 p.m. near the tapas bar. This statement does not harmonise with any other statements about Madeleine that afternoon. But then 2 days later, when he made his formal statement, he said that he cannot be sure if he had seen Madeleine or the twins. It's a statement whose evidential value is therefore worthless. There is also a statement by Maria Manuela Antonio Jose, a tapas bar cook. She claims to have seen Madeleine having a meal in the tapas area around 4:30 p.m, as she says she did every day. Again though, this statement conflicts with other evidence, so we can reject it. None of the waiters in the tapas area could remember serving any children high tea on the 3rd of May. I conclude from the above that apart from the contradictory evidence from Jerry McCann, Kate McCann and the creche nanny Kat Baker, that there is no other credible evidence that this so-called high tea, allegedly with Madeleine present, actually took place. Another creche worker who claims to have seen Madeleine that week is Charlotte Pennington. She gave a statement to the Portuguese police on Monday the 7th of May. This is what she says, that she worked with the younger infants group called the Baby Club. It was divided into 3 subgroups. She was responsible for one of those groups. She says that the physical space where the children's groups are located is contiguous, so that in the course of her work she came across Madeleine McCann and her group, the Mini Club, many times. She sometimes took part with the Mini Club group. This would be between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. and 3 p.m. She remembers telling Madeleine stories and speaking with her on 2 specific occasions. One was on Sunday the 29th of April, the other on Thursday the 3rd of May. She gives no times of day for these events, and she says nothing about seeing Madeleine at the alleged high tea. She describes Madeleine as a child who conversed normally for her age and was of a calm demeanour. She adds that it was usual for Madeleine to be called Maddie, as this is how she, Madeleine, presented herself to the witness. She says that Madeleine was normally left by her parents around 9:15 a.m. at the creche, as her parents usually left the twins beforehand at the toddler club. She says that she is not aware of any situation that seemed odd or strange related directly or indirectly to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. But over 4 months later, Charlotte Pennington made an appearance in a lengthy Daily Mail article by Dan Newling on the 25th of September 2007. The article was headlined, "Kate did scream, they've taken her, claims new nanny witness." The new witness was Charlotte Pennington. Now that's very strange, because she doesn't mention this new significant detail about Kate screaming "they've taken her" in her statement to the Portuguese police. We only start hearing from Pennington in media reports in late September. Why didn't Pennington mention this issue, described as pivotal by the Daily Mail, when she was first questioned? If the Mail article is correct, This is an important reason for questioning whether she is a truthful witness. Let's see what the article says. She dismissed claims that the McCanns were not seen for 6 hours leading up to the disappearance. She said, "I was helping give the children high tea. The twins were there, and Madeleine and both parents. It was supposed to finish at 5:30 p.m, but because they were a big group and really social, it didn't finish until about 6 p.m. There was nothing out of the ordinary at all." So, a second time, according to the Mail, Charlotte Pennington has apparently remembered something that she failed to mention to the Portuguese police in her first statement. The background to the Daily Mail article is that for a couple of weeks the Portuguese and British newspapers were speculating about the so-called missing 6 hours between about 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. on the day Madeleine disappeared. This was said to be a period when the McCanns could not properly account for what they were doing. So, in response, it seems the McCann team, no doubt with the help of Clarence Mitchell, planted many stories in the British mainstream press trying to explain these missing 6 hours. This article featuring Charlotte Pennington was just one of many. So what exactly is Miss Pennington reported as saying in these articles about the high tea? The article says she was there, she helped to give the children high tea, both parents, Madeleine and the children, were there, the high tea was supposed to finish at 5:30 p.m. Because everyone was enjoying it, it carried on till 6 p.m. It was a big group. Apart from the fact that we need to explain why Pennington didn't mention this when first questioned, this story doesn't match at all with what either Kate McCann or Kat Baker said about it. Kate McCann talks of Madeleine and the twins already having tea with Jerry when she arrived at 5:30 p.m. She says the high tea was supposed to finish at 5:30 p.m. Yet Kate says she only just got there at 5:30 p.m. after her run on the beach. Neither Kate McCann, nor Jerry McCann, nor Kat Baker make mention of other children or big group of children and parents, which the Charlotte Pennington article states. Moreover, neither Kate McCann, nor Jerry McCann, nor Kat Baker say that Charlotte Pennington was at this high tea, yet another contradiction. We also saw earlier that none of the waiters recollect a group of parents and children having high tea that day, and no parent who was on holiday that week mentions being at this alleged high tea with their children either. As we examine the evidence, it looks as though this alleged high tea event could be an invention, first by the McCanns, and then second by Kat Baker, and finally by Charlotte Pennington, at least according to the Daily Mail article featuring her. And now I want to bring in what Jerry McCann himself said about this supposed event when he was questioned for the second time by the Portuguese police on the 10th of May. He certainly said nothing about it in his first statement on the 4th of May. Here is an extract from his second statement. The deponent and Kate returned to the Ocean Club by the shortcut, and at the secondary reception they asked the lady employee if there was a vacant tennis court they could reserve. They were told there was a vacancy between 14:30 and 15:30. As it was already 1500, they began to play immediately. At 15:30 the tennis instructor arrived, who instructed each of them until 16:30. They stayed in that place, talking until 16:45, at which time the twins went to the meal area. At 1700, as usual, Madeleine arrived accompanied by the teachers and the other children. After her arrival, Madeleine ate the meal, having ended at 17:30. After 17:30, they went to the apartment, the deponent having entered by the main door, which he did not lock while he was inside the residence. Kate and the children entered by the rear door, after this had been opened from the inside by the deponent. So here, Jerry McCann tells the police that he and his wife played tennis until 4:30 p.m. Then they hung around on the courts until 4:45 p.m, at which time the twins were presumably brought by the creche worker to the tapas area, and they went there to meet them. He says Madeleine arrived with the creche nanny and others at 5 p.m, and they all had tea together, leaving for their apartment at 5:30 p.m. Perhaps the first thing we note about this account is that it is wholly at variance with what Kate McCann says in her book. She says she was running on the beach at 5:15 p.m, while Jerry says they played tennis and then went together to the tapas area at 4:45 p.m. No mention of Kate's long jog at the beach. Then we recall that Kate said that Jerry was already with the children when she arrived back from her run, direct to the tapas bar, and then met up with the children and Jerry. But Jerry in his statement says that he and Kate were already together. Jerry says that the teachers, he means the nannies, brought the children to the tapas area. But then we remember that the creche entries apparently signed by Kate McCann show Kate McCann taking the twins out of the creche at 5:25 p.m. and again Kate McCann taking Madeleine out of her creche at 5:30 p.m. Yet Jerry says in his statement that the twins left the creche at 4:45 p.m, a full 40 minutes before Kate. It has been suggested that the parents would all sign the creche records at the tapas area rather than when they collected the children from the clubs. If that were the case, then according to what Kate, Jerry and the two nannies all say, surely the creche register would have all three children signed out later than 5:30 p.m, which according to Kate McCann is the time she had only just arrived. All parties claim that this high tea went on to 6 p.m. Jerry in his statement says that Madeleine left her creche and arrived at the high tea at 5 p.m. But how can that be reconciled with the creche records, which show Kate McCann collecting her at 5:30 p.m? We have examined several irreconcilable witness statements about this alleged high tea. Jerry McCann solemnly gives a considered statement about the events of that late afternoon to the Portuguese police on the 10th of May 2007. Almost exactly 4 years later, Kate McCann publishes a book which she claims is her version of the truth, yet it contradicts her husband's statement in several important respects. The creche nannies don't agree with what the McCanns say about the high tea, and the nannies don't appear to agree with each other about it. So what are we to make of this? Did the high tea happen? Let's look, for example, at what one long-time Madeleine McCann researcher, Lizzie Taylor, a British expat now working in Canada, has to say about the high tea. She makes these points. Jerry McCann claims to have been at high tea while the children were there and Kate arrived after her jog at approximately 5:30 p.m. Catriona, the nanny, claims that Jerry wasn't there and that he was playing tennis, which is very odd, as who would have told her that? And when? Kate consistently claims that Madeleine was very tired and Madeleine asked her mother to carry her home. Kate then carried her back to the apartment, but Jerry claims they went to the patio doors and he let them in through the back. If indeed Kate had been carrying Madeleine, how did she manage the twins on her own, climbing the steep steps at the rear of the apartment? This was a few hours before Madeleine disappeared, and yet Kate claims she went in through the front doors. What mother would not remember the door used 3 hours before she claims she saw her daughter for the last time? Was it Jerry that got it wrong? Did they really go back to the apartment at that time? They can't agree on what door was used even the following morning when they gave their statements. I suggest we simply cannot accept any of this evidence as any kind of proof that Madeleine did have high tea with her brother, sister and parents. And on that very important evidential matter, I respectfully have to say that Gonçalo Amaral and his team of detectives, working under an international media spotlight and being fed one contradiction after another by the McCanns and their friends, may have been misled. As a result of this belief that they were telling him the truth, Gonçalo Amaral formulated the view that Madeleine died from some kind of accident in the McCann's apartment sometime after 6 p.m. on the 3rd of May. But I suggest that based on the evidence we have examined about the high tea, it clearly does not provide credible evidence of Madeleine being alive at this time. So this is where we've now arrived with our timeline. So then, were there any more reported sightings of Madeleine that afternoon? The answer is yes, there were two. One of these, a photograph allegedly at 2:29 p.m. that afternoon, is crucial. But first, let's deal with the other one. An alleged photograph taken by another parent on holiday, Philip Martin Edmonds. He and his wife were apparently divorced. He had gone to Praia de Luz that week with his 3 boys, aged between 6 and 10. He was on holiday in Praia de Luz for the very same week as the McCanns. I hope to be having a look in more detail in my next film about Madeleine at some of the interesting names on the guest list that week and what this might mean. Edmonds was and is on the board of directors of one of the world's largest steel firms, Stemco Limited, with an annual turnover of billions of pounds. The company has offices and factories in several countries, including the UK and Switzerland. Edmonds at the time appeared to be dividing his time between the two countries. At some point, when the debate in the press was raging about the missing 6 hours on the 3rd of May, for which the McCanns appeared to be unable to account for, several articles appeared in the British press claiming that Edmonds had a photograph of his 3 boys playing happily on the grass in the Ocean Club playground on Thursday the 3rd of May, the very date Madeleine was reported missing, with Madeleine somewhere in the background. But this photograph, allegedly proving that Madeleine was still alive at that time, has never been produced to my knowledge. Back in 2011, a Madeleine McCann researcher wrote to Edmonds and asked him about this photograph. Here, first of all, is the letter. The question was asked, "I am wondering, therefore, if you would kindly be able to tell me whether you or any member of your family had any contact with the McCanns and their children on Thursday the 3rd of May, and also whether you have any photographs of Madeleine taken on that specific day." This drew this response from Mr. Edmonds. "I am in receipt of your letter of 22nd of July regarding Madeleine McCann. I am sure you would appreciate that it would not be appropriate for me to comment too much, as we do not know each other and I have no idea what your connection to the case is. However, I would not want further conspiracy theories to fester by simply ignoring your letter. Therefore I can confirm that whatever information I had, including some photographs of my sons taken on the day Madeleine disappeared, which showed her in the background, was passed both to the police and to the McCanns at the time. Having been in Portugal at the time of Madeleine's disappearance and seen all of the events first-hand, there is not one shred of doubt in my mind that the events as reported were correct. In fact, one of the most terrible parts of this tragedy is that there are people out there who are questioning this, just adding further to the nightmare that the McCann family have suffered. I cannot imagine anything crueler. I am afraid I won't enter into further correspondence on this matter with you." And that was that. Except perhaps to mention his connection to Labour Party grandee Lady Margaret Hodge, a member of the rich, well-connected and powerful Oppenheimer family, who is Edmonds' aunt. Philip Edmonds' uncle is Ralph Oppenheimer, who was also on the Stemco board. Indeed, Stemco, as a brief internet search reveals, is an Oppenheimer family business. Philip Edmonds, father Herbert Edmonds, had married Hannah, the daughter of Hans Lisbeth Oppenheimer. Hodge, of course, was a leading Labour councillor in Islington, where she became notorious for covering up extensive child abuse in what became known as the Islington Children's Home Scandal, fully exposed in the 1990s. In 2003, despite this appalling record, Prime Minister Tony Blair made her Britain's first ever Minister for Children. Now Lady Margaret Hodge was a very close associate of Lord Levy. Both headed up Tony Blair's notorious fundraising team, with various celebrities like Bernie Ecclestone invited to donate to the Labour Party in return for being made lords a few weeks later. Lord Levy was questioned under caution by the Met Police during the affair, but the police never pressed charges. Interestingly, Dame Vivian Duffy was one of the major donors to the Labour Party at this time. She is a patron of the charity Missing People, which 4 years ago made Kate McCann one of their ambassadors, a strange choice given her admission that she and her husband were prepared to leave 3 young children under 4 on their own while they went out wining and dining. Why a very wealthy and well-connected man like Philip Edmonds should choose the rather rudimentary resort of Praia de Luz as his holiday venue for that week, 28th of April to the 5th of May, is unclear. But what is clear is that this photograph, if it exists, has never been published to my knowledge. I suggest that if there really was a photograph of Madeleine that could be proved to have been taken on the 3rd of May, we would have seen it by now. Now let's go on to examine a photograph that is said to provide absolute proof that Madeleine was alive that afternoon, taken, it is claimed, at precisely 2:29 p.m. on the 3rd of May. The famous so-called last photo of Jerry McCann, Madeleine and her younger sister Amelie. Step by step, I am going to show you evidence that this photograph was most likely taken 4 days earlier than claimed, that is, on Sunday the 29th of April. If I am right, then the purported date and time of the photograph is a forgery, and if so, that makes it a criminal offence in both Portugal and England, and especially so if this forgery was deliberately created to prevent the police finding out what really happened to a missing 3-year-old. I am also going to suggest that there are no photos whatsoever of Madeleine alive after Sunday that week, only the second day of her holiday, and after that I will examine other evidence which suggests that there is no other credible proof that Madeleine was alive after that first Sunday. But first, I want to mention 2 very strange features about the McCann's holiday that week. The first is that there are only 5 still photographs of Madeleine that week which have been made available to the police and public, apart from the one Philip Edmonds claimed to have taken, which has never been shown to my knowledge. Why just 5? There are also 2 short video clips of the family on the way to the plane that took them to Portugal on Saturday the 28th of April. The second mystery is why, when the police asked for a sample of Madeleine's DNA, the McCanns were unable to produce any. They had nothing, apparently, neither on her clothes, nor her bedclothes, nor pillows, soft toys, or things like hairbrush or toothbrush that would yield any of her DNA. That is remarkable, and could indicate the McCanns sterilised the clothes and belongings of Madeleine before she was reported missing. The McCanns actually maintained that Madeleine shared her toothbrush with her younger sister Amelie, thus meaning that the police couldn't take a sample from it. I have to say, I personally do not believe that children in a family like this one would share a toothbrush. In fact, to get any of Madeleine's DNA, the police had to wait for 3 weeks after Madeleine was reported missing, when Jerry McCann returned to England for a weekend. One of his tasks was to find some of Madeleine's DNA. He did so by producing Madeleine's pillow for a DNA test to a Leicestershire police officer. Quite why Madeleine's DNA could be found on a pillow in Rothley 3 weeks after she was reported missing, and not on the pillow she was supposedly sleeping on the night she was allegedly abducted, has never been explained. Let me now deal with these 5 photos that we do have very briefly. Here they are. There are 3 of Madeleine playing in the grounds of the Ocean Club. This first one shows her playing with Jerry McCann and is generally called the playground photo. Now, the McCanns in a handout once described this and the other 2 photographs taken in the Ocean Club play area as having been taken on the afternoon of Wednesday the 2nd of May, the day before she was reported missing. There is, however, no credible evidence to support this, apart from their own words. On these 3 images, Madeleine appears to be wearing the same clothes as she was on the videos of her in the airport bus and boarding the plane, except that possibly she might have had a change of trousers. Sean is dressed exactly the same as on the airport bus videos. Moreover, the photographs fit perfectly with what we are told happened on that first afternoon after the McCann family arrived in Praia de Luz. After unpacking in mid-afternoon, they and their friends went down to the Ocean Club playground. The shadows on the photo are quite long, suggesting they may have been taken sometime between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. late afternoon, early evening. Here are the other two photos of Madeleine playing at a Wendy house in the Ocean Club playground. There is no sun on these two pictures, but that is entirely consistent with what we know about the weather that day. Here is a photo taken early evening on Saturday the 28th of April, around the same time on Saturday that I believe these photos of Madeleine were taken. You can clearly see plenty of blue sky, but also fluffy, broken clouds. Weather charts for that day show light cloud from 2 p.m. until 6 p.m. The pictures of Madeleine by the Wendy house were taken during a period of cloud cover on an otherwise sunny day. Every available indication from these three photographs and from what we know for certain about the McCann's movements that day tell us that they were probably taken late afternoon on the first day of their holiday. They are wholly consistent with Madeleine running around and enjoying herself in her new surroundings. I personally believe there is a very high degree of certainty that all these three images were all taken on Saturday the 28th of April, not the Wednesday as the McCanns claim. This is accepted by many Madeleine McCann researchers. So these three photos could prove Madeleine was alive at least on the first day of the holiday, Saturday the 28th of April.